Hi everybody, it's Sarah, and it's Fabulous Friday, and I am back from camp for a bit. I work as a camp nurse up north, so I'm back for a couple of days, so I decided to post a video, and I'm going to try and post some more videos, but the internet access up there isn't super amazing, so we'll see. But I was just so super excited about this topic, and about, us asking questions of each other, that I wanted to jump in, so that's why I'm here. And Brianna asked me a question, and it is, can you explain the different treatments for PTSD and trauma, and tell us which ones you found are helpful and which ones aren't helpful? I don't know all of them, obviously, but I have been, the root of my eating disorder was PTSD. I never really typically fit a classic eating disorder in that all my body image concerns were very, very much linked to the fact that I didn't want to look like a woman, that I didn't want to appear attractive, that I didn't, it was all linked to my experience. And to be quite honest, my PTSD, it was quite extensive, and it was very long. The experience that I had, my trauma, it went from about 3 to probably about 22. So it's made me who I am, and for good, for better, for worse, whatever. It isn't who I am. It doesn't define who I am, but it's made me who I am. It makes me very compassionate and very understanding. I don't judge people very quickly, or I try not to anyway. And when I do, I'm very open to changing that judgment, provided that you give me a solid, logical, understandable reason to do so. So, yeah, what treatments have I tried for trauma? I haven't actually done that much eating disorder treatment. I was inpatient twice, and I did a day hospital program once, which I probably got very kicked out of. Oops. And so I haven't done that much eating disorder treatment. With my PTSD and with the improvement of my symptoms of trauma and dissociation, the eating disorder gets better. The eating disorder has always been a crutch. The eating disorder has always been something for me to lean on. And, in that case, I've actually been through a lot more PTSD treatment than I have eating disorder treatment. And it's been extensive. It's been anything from CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, and I'm working on that in terms of your beliefs that you have, that you formed as a result of the trauma that you went through. So beliefs like, I'm not worth it, I'm not deserving, my needs aren't important, all that kind of thing, like everything that we were taught through the trauma experience. You have to challenge that, and through CBT, and that's one way to do it, for sure. And CBT, that's actually what I'm working on now. I kind of cycle through different therapies, because I think that they all have their merits, and they all have their strengths, and I think that, you need to be able to tap into all of that. But I also don't think that there's just one way to do it. I think there are many different ways to do it. So for me, the CBT was very helpful in that, I'm using it now. That's one of the primary, avenues that I use to challenge the beliefs that I have around me, around how my trauma has shaped me, how my PTSD has affected me, and, the beliefs that I formed as a child. And, I think that if there's any sort of treatment that you have to tap into almost universally, in some form or another, people are going to have to do that. I think that taking those beliefs, and changing them, and altering them so that you start to believe something different, something true, is very, very important. It doesn't have to be in the setting of, a therapist and a client. It can always be in the setting of a therapist and a group, that kind of thing. It can be you reading a book, and thought records are very helpful that way as well. It's one of the books that I found quite helpful is Mind Over Mood, and they have something called a thought record, where you have your thought, and you basically dissect it, and see how it's impacting the way that you believe, the way that you feel, the way that you think. So I found CBT quite helpful. It's one of the therapies that I return to a lot. DBT, love DBT. DBT is really good, not necessarily as a direct tool to deal with trauma, but it is an exceptional tool for dealing with emotion regulation problems. A lot of people who've been through trauma have very difficult times regulating themselves, and that makes complete and total sense to me. When you're constantly on the cusp of danger and of instability and of chaos, there's not much time to learn how to soothe yourself, to learn how to regulate. And so for me, DBT was very helpful in that it gave me those skills so that I could address the trauma. One of the other therapies that I've used quite extensively is EMDR. It is a form of hypnosis. It's not necessarily hypnosis in the, you are getting sleepy. It's more hypnosis in, and again, that it incorporates a large part of CBT in that you recount the experience, you go through the experience again, you start realizing how you think, how you feel, how it makes you feel, how it makes you think, and how it relates to your life, and you replay the experience, and you change it so that you realize, it's one of the more complicated therapies. It's something that you realize that you are different. Like, you go back and you realize that there are certain details that are different, that you're not, that you basically intervene in the experience on your behalf again, so that you learn that you're not powerless, that you were then, but you're not now. And EMDR stands for Eye Movement Desensitization, EMDR, and reprocessing. So one of the premises that it uses is that it wants you to use both sides of your brain to process and to take what was a very traumatic experience that hasn't been stored in the narrative memory. So the narrative memory is something like a story. I went to the store last night and I bought this. And that's something that we can describe, something that we can just articulate, and something that is almost tucked away in a neat little box in your brain. And trauma's not. Trauma is very recurrent. It comes up. It doesn't, it springs up. It surprises you, and it interferes with your everyday life. And so as trauma has to be addressed in a way that the narrative memory is. So what EMDR does is it takes that memory and you talk it out, and you realize, how has this made me who I am? How has this changed how I believe? How does it change how I behave? What am I incorrect about? What are the beliefs that I am believing that aren't necessarily true, that aren't necessarily functional, that aren't working for me? And how can I change them? And how can I, take that and learn to empower myself instead of be a victim of this trauma continually? And so it's taking that trauma and putting it in a neat little box so that you can recount it the same way you can when you went to the store. The store is not a traumatic experience because it's put away, in its place, and you remember it only when you need to, and you remember it of your own accord, and you have control, and it's not threatening. The idea of EMDR is to take the trauma and do the same, so that it's sitting on that same shelf in a box, the same way that every other memory that we have is, so that it doesn't sort of, sneak up on you and ambush you. I have found EMDR exceptionally helpful. It is, taking things that were inherent to who I was, taking experiences that have just changed who I was, and not necessarily for the better, and taking the power from them. I find EMDR very helpful. It is extremely difficult, though. It is emotionally draining. It wears you down. I have felt extremely suicidal in between sessions of EMDR. Some of the dissociation symptoms have gotten really, really difficult in between sessions of EMDR, and I guess the main thing about trauma therapy is that you can't do it alone. You need to talk. You need to rob that secret of its power. And the way that you do that, however silently, however quietly, is by breaking the silence. So if just one person knows, you're on your way. So if you tell one person, an anonymous person, someone on a crisis line, something like that, you've taken the power back. And so one of the things is that you have to keep talking. You have to keep talking. You can't keep it a secret. You can't keep that inside you. You don't have to go on the newscast and announce what happened, definitely, but you do have to rob that secret of its power, and you do that by breaking that silence. The second thing that's extremely important in all trauma therapy is taking care of yourself. It is so, so, so important, and that's probably what the DBT, the dialectical behavioral therapy, did most for me. Was it taught me how to eat, how to sleep, how to be kind to myself. So all those skills are really, really necessary. You need to be able to, when you're in a position where you're very scared and very unregulated and very just not grounded, you need to be able to take that back and just nurture and soothe yourself through music, through silence, through meditation, through exercise, through everything, but in healthy moderation. It's taking care of yourself is probably one of the staples of trauma therapy. If you do trauma therapy and then go home and hurt yourself, you're just reenacting that trauma. And I was actually at Homewood earlier this year, and for reasons that I don't really want to get into, but reenactment had started to become sort of the main theme in my life. The trauma was no longer going on in my life. I was no longer being victimized by a person, but I was being victimized by myself. I was taking those beliefs, those thoughts, those feelings that I had around my trauma and inflicting them upon myself. And at Homewood, one of the huge themes is that traumatic reenactment. What can you do to break that cycle? And if you do trauma therapy and you go for it and tell everybody what's going on, but then go home and hurt yourself, you're just reenacting that trauma. You're just starting it again in a different form. So that's why taking care of yourself is so, so important. You have to take it very, very slowly, in your own time, on your own accord, and you have to be careful, and you have to trust. And trust is hard, definitely. But the secret is that when you trust yourself, you can do anything. And when you trust yourself to take care of yourself, and that's the mastery that goes with it, it just, it sets you free. It sets you free from that trauma. So that's what I would say is, I think CBT is definitely very important for challenging the thoughts and the beliefs and the feelings that you have about your trauma. And EMDR can be very, very good for transferring what you thought was true, and that impulse, that inherent sort of who you are, alignment and definition of yourself with that trauma into a story, into something that you can recount as an event rather than as a defining characteristic of who you are. And DBT for the emotional regulation aspect of it, for the taking care of yourself aspect of it. All that is very, very important, as well as breaking that silence. So I hope that you found this kind of helpful. If not, feel free to message me. I might not be around for the next couple months or a month. but my heart is always with freedom fighters, and I will be here for a while. So I will come back. Let me know, and I hope you all have a fantastic week. Thanks. Bye.